Have you ever noticed how some people command respect without ever raising their voice? How certain individuals seem to hold an invisible power that draws others toward them like magnets? Today, we're going to explore something that may fundamentally change how you view personal power and influence. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. In a world obsessed with visibility, where social media feeds flood with attention-seeking behavior and the loudest voices often get the most recognition, we've been sold a dangerous myth. The myth that being seen equals being powerful. But what if I told you that true power operates in precisely the opposite way? Has this ever happened to you? You're in a meeting or social gathering, and someone walks in who immediately shifts the energy of the entire room without saying a word or drawing explicit attention to themselves. That's not coincidence. That's the manifestation of silent power. The most influential forces in our lives often work invisibly. Gravity doesn't announce itself, yet it shapes our entire existence. The same principle applies to human influence. When you become devoted to inner precision and focus rather than external validation, you develop a presence that others can feel without you needing to perform. Stay with me until the end, because we're going to unpack how this counterintuitive approach to personal power can transform not just how others perceive you, but how you experience your own life. This isn't about manipulation tactics or social games. It's about cultivating genuine internal substance that naturally commands respect. The truly powerful person isn't desperately available to everyone, constantly performing for attention or validation. They're selective with their energy, precise with their focus, and comfortable with being unavailable when necessary. They understand that scarcity creates value, not just in economics, but in human relationships as well. What you're about to discover might surprise you, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that constant visibility and accessibility are the paths to influence. The truth is that when you're continuously available, continuously visible, and continuously seeking attention, you're actually diminishing your power rather than enhancing it. Subscribe now for more insights on psychological mastery and personal sovereignty. Think about the people who have most influenced your life. Were they the ones desperately seeking your approval, or the ones who seemed complete within themselves? Were they the ones constantly visible, or the ones whose rare presence felt like a meaningful event? The path to developing this silent power begins with a fundamental shift, moving your focus from external validation to internal cultivation. It requires developing the courage to be unavailable sometimes, to focus precisely on what matters to you, and to trust that your value doesn't depend on constant visibility. As we continue exploring this concept, you'll discover that what makes someone truly influential isn't how often they're seen, but how deeply they're felt when they are present. This distinction between focusing inward versus feeling the need to project outward represents a powerful transformation in how we navigate our social landscape. When you detach from the constant need for external validation, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your personal power. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about establishing healthy boundaries around your energy. Think about the last time you felt compelled to explain your decisions to someone who hadn't earned that level of access to your thought process. That urge to justify comes from a place of perceived powerlessness, as if your choices require outside approval to be legitimate. The key reality is that excessive explanation often undermines your position rather than strengthening it. What's fascinating is how this pattern plays out in our digital lives too. We've cultivated a culture where oversharing has become normalized, where the intimate details of our decision-making processes are served up for public consumption before we've even fully processed them ourselves. This transparency, while seemingly authentic, can create unexpected vulnerabilities in how others perceive and respond to us. The hidden truth here lies in understanding the power of strategic ambiguity. When you don't rush to explain every aspect of your thinking, you create space for others to fill in the gaps, often in ways that actually serve your interests better than your own explanations would have. This isn't manipulation, it's recognizing that constant transparency isn't always in your best interest. I've witnessed this revelation play out repeatedly in professional settings. Those who carefully consider when to reveal their reasoning versus when to simply stand firmly in their decisions tend to command more respect. They're perceived as more confident, more intentional, and ultimately more influential. Their silence isn't interpreted as uncertainty, but as self-assurance. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how self-focus manifests as a quiet strength rather than a weakness. The journey toward true confidence paradoxically involves less outward projection and more internal cultivation. When you're genuinely secure in your choices and direction, you feel less compelled to broadcast them for approval or validation. The impact of this mindset shift extends far beyond individual interactions. It reshapes your entire relationship with power dynamics in all areas of life. You begin to recognize that your personal power isn't something others grant you through their approval. It's something you already possess and simply need to stop giving away through unnecessary justification and explanation. If you've experienced this shift in your own life, that moment when you realized you didn't need to explain yourself and felt that immediate sense of empowerment, write "power reclaimed" in the comments. I'd love to hear about your experience with this revelation. This state of being unreachable isn't about isolation or indifference. It's about creating a sanctuary for your personal transformation. When you deliberately choose who and what gets your attention, you're actually engaging in one of the most profound acts of self-respect possible in our hyper-connected world. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most focused, most alive. Chances are, those weren't times when you were constantly available to everyone. Those were moments of deep presence, when you were fully immersed in what mattered to you. This is the hidden truth behind the power of inaccessibility. It's not about hiding, it's about showing up completely for what deserves your energy. Time, as I mentioned, functions as both sword and shield. As a sword, it cuts through distractions and carves out the path to your goals. As a shield, it protects your most valuable resource, your attention. The revelation here is that most people unconsciously surrender this weapon-shield combination, handing it over to whoever demands it most loudly. Hit subscribe to join us on this journey of mental dominance and genuine influence behind the scenes. Of every great achievement lies this common thread: protected time and protected mental space. When you examine the journey of anyone who's created something meaningful, you'll find periods of deliberate inaccessibility. The artist who disconnects to complete their masterpiece, the entrepreneur who blocks off mornings for deep work, the parent who creates sacred, device-free time with their children. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens in the mind when we reclaim our time and attention. There's a fascinating psychological shift that occurs when you stop being constantly available. Your nervous system literally recalibrates. The constant state of alert, wondering who might need you next, begins to settle. This creates space for your most original thoughts to emerge. This practice is ultimately about recognizing the impact of your choices around availability. Each time you say yes to an interruption, you're saying no to something else. Often, something more aligned with your deepest values. Each time you make yourself unreachable for a period of focused work or rest, you're making a decision that honors your priorities. The underlying mindset shift is profound. Instead of seeing yourself as a resource that others can tap at will, you begin to see yourself as the steward of your own energy and attention. You recognize that these are finite treasures that deserve to be allocated with intention. What's particularly powerful about this approach is how it affects your relationships. Counter to what you might expect, becoming selectively unreachable often enhances your connections with others. When you do engage, you bring your full presence rather than a scattered, depleted version of yourself. If any of this resonates with your own experience of trying to protect your time and energy in a demanding world, write "Guardian of my time" in the comments below. I'd love to know who else is practicing this art of selective availability. When you start viewing your energy as a form of currency, a profound shift happens in how you approach each day. Think about it. Would you casually hand out $100 bills to random strangers who offer nothing in return? Of course not. Yet many of us willingly deplete our energetic reserves on pointless debates, doom-scrolling sessions, and conversations that lead nowhere. This transformation in perspective is what separates those who make consistent progress from those who remain stuck in endless cycles of distraction. The most successful people I've encountered all share this common trait. They're incredibly protective of where their energy flows. They understand the hidden truth that your attention isn't just being requested, it's being hunted. Behind the scenes of every notification, every argument on social media, every unnecessary meeting lies the same reality. Someone or something is feeding off your most precious resource. Your energy has a finite daily supply, and once depleted, your ability to build anything meaningful diminishes dramatically. This brings me to what might be the most powerful strategy I've witnessed: building in obscurity and attacking with clarity. There's something almost magical about moving in silence while you're developing your skills, your business, your art, whatever matters most to you. This isn't about being secretive for the sake of mystery. It's about creating a protected space where your vision can take root before facing the world's judgment. When you build in obscurity, you're giving yourself the gift of uninterrupted focus. You're allowing your ideas to develop their full strength without premature exposure to criticism, or sometimes worse, premature praise that might lead you to settle for less than your best work. This protected phase is where the real foundations of excellence are established. Then comes the moment to attack with clarity, to emerge from that protected space with such precision and force that your impact is undeniable. This isn't aggression, it's directed purpose. It's knowing exactly what you stand for and moving toward it with such conviction that obstacles naturally part in your path. The journey between these two states, protected development and purposeful action, isn't linear. You'll cycle between them throughout your life and career, sometimes retreating to rebuild or refine, other times stepping forward with everything you've created. What's fascinating about this approach is how it contradicts so much of what our hyper-connected culture promotes. We're told to share everything, to build in public, to constantly seek feedback. And while there's value in transparency, there's also immense power in selective revelation, in knowing when to share and when to incubate. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this energy-conscious approach transforms not just what you achieve, but who you become in the process. Because protecting your energy isn't just about productivity, it's about preserving your authentic self in a world that constantly pushes you toward conformity. If this resonates with your own experience, write "Guarding my energy" in the comments below. This mastery of emotional control reveals a deeper truth. When we're triggered, we instantly surrender our power. Think about the last time someone made you angry or upset. In that moment, your emotions were no longer your own. They belonged to whoever pushed your buttons. This is the invisible battlefield where most power dynamics are actually decided. What's fascinating is how this extends beyond just hiding your feelings. It's about developing what I call emotional sovereignty, the ability to choose your responses rather than having them chosen for you. The most influential people throughout history weren't necessarily the strongest or loudest, but those who maintained their composure when everyone else was losing theirs. Consider how this transforms every day. Interactions. When your coworker makes that passive-aggressive comment that would normally set you off, your new emotional invisibility allows you to see it for what it really is, often insecurity or fear disguised as confidence. Rather than reacting, you can now respond strategically, either disarming them with unexpected kindness or simply allowing an uncomfortable silence to hang in the air, forcing them to fill it and potentially reveal their true intentions. This journey toward emotional mastery isn't just about power, it's about freedom. The revelation here is that most people live their entire lives as emotional puppets, pulled by strings they don't even realize exist. Every advertisement, social media notification, and carefully crafted message is designed to trigger predictable emotional responses that benefit someone else. Now, I want to go even deeper into this concept of emotional invisibility by exploring how it creates what psychologists call presence gaps. These moments of calm amidst chaos don't just protect you from manipulation. They create a magnetic quality that others subconsciously respect and are drawn to. There's something almost mysterious about someone who remains centered when everyone else is reactive. The hidden impact of mastering this skill extends far beyond individual interactions. It reshapes your entire social and professional landscape. People begin treating you differently, not because you've demanded respect verbally, but because your emotional steadiness communicates something profound about your inner strength. What's particularly powerful about this approach is that unlike manipulation techniques that eventually expose themselves, emotional invisibility actually becomes more effective the more genuinely you embody it. It's not about putting on a mask, but rather removing the reactive masks we've been conditioned to wear throughout our lives. If what I'm saying resonates with your experiences, write emotional sovereignty in the comments. I'd love to know if this perspective gives you a new way of seeing your daily interactions. Think about the countless moments when you felt drained after interacting with certain people. That depletion isn't random. It's the direct result of energy leaks you've unknowingly allowed. The truth is, emotional availability has been marketed to us as a virtue, but in reality, it's often the silent assassin of our personal power. When you habitually respond with full, emotional investment to every situation, you're essentially leaving your energy reserves unguarded. I've witnessed this transformation in clients who came to me completely depleted. They were the emotional sponges in their relationships, absorbing everyone else's problems while their own reserves ran dry. The revelation that changed everything for them was understanding that strategic responses aren't cold, they're self-preserving. Behind the scenes of every high performer's journey is a carefully crafted emotional boundary system. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about directed emotional investment. The hidden truth most people miss is that stoicism isn't the absence of feeling, it's the mastery of it. Consider how often your mental space becomes cluttered with thoughts about what others might think, replaying conversations, or anticipating problems that haven't even occurred. Each of these mental loops represents a tiny puncture in your energy reservoir. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic and explore how these energy leaks manifest in everyday scenarios you probably experience without even recognizing them. The impact of reclaiming your energy is profound. One client described it as finally breathing clearly after years of living in a fog. When you systematically identify and seal these energy leaks, you're not just preserving power, you're amplifying it. Your decision-making improves, your presence becomes more commanding, and, paradoxically, your relationships often strengthen because you're bringing your best self to them. What's particularly fascinating is how our culture has normalized these energy drains. We celebrate the person who's always available, always responding, always connected, without questioning the toll this takes. The mindset shift required isn't complicated, but it does require intentional practice and permission to prioritize your energetic well-being. If you've ever found yourself nodding along, as I describe these patterns, write energy preserved in the comments. I'm curious how many of you recognize these patterns in your own lives. Now let's examine the specific tactical approaches that can help you identify and address these leaks in practical, immediately applicable ways. The transformation happens in silence when no one's watching. This is why the greatest power you'll ever build comes from auditing what enters your consciousness daily. Think about it. Your mind is processing thousands of inputs every single day. Conversations, social media, news, entertainment, even the energy of people around you. Each of these inputs is either feeding your power or draining it. When I first recognized this hidden truth, I began ruthlessly eliminating inputs that weren't serving my evolution. It wasn't easy to cut off certain people, delete social media apps, or say no to seemingly harmless distractions. But the clarity that emerged was profound. My decisions became sharper, my vision clearer. This is what few people understand about the journey toward personal sovereignty. It requires periods of intentional isolation, not isolation born of fear or avoidance, but strategic solitude that allows your authentic self to emerge without constant external influence. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. Walking alone doesn't mean permanent isolation. It means building your foundation in silence before bringing your newfound strength back into the world. Think about how a butterfly forms in its cocoon, complete isolation during its most critical transformation. If you crack open a cocoon too early to help the butterfly, you actually prevent it from developing the wing strength it needs to fly. The same principle applies to your personal development. The resistance you feel when rebuilding yourself in privacy is precisely what builds your strength. This is why most people remain stagnant. They never allow themselves the discomfort of that cocoon phase, where the real metamorphosis happens. Behind the scenes of every remarkable person you admire was a period where they disappeared, reconsidered everything, and emerged unrecognizable. Steve Jobs, during his wilderness years after being forced out of Apple. Maya Angelou, during her years of self-imposed silence. Nelson Mandela, in his prison cell for 27 years. These weren't just passive waiting periods, they were active internal revolutions. Your evolution follows this same pattern. The initial phase requires you to step away from the noise, challenge your assumptions, build new mental models, and practice your craft without the distraction of external validation. It's in this seemingly invisible phase that your real power accumulates. Have you noticed how the most impactful people aren't necessarily the most visible during their development phases? They understand the power of incubation. They know that premature exposure to criticism or praise can derail authentic growth. If something in this resonates with you, write "ready to build in silence" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you are already feeling that internal pull towards strategic solitude. The fascinating paradox about psychological dominance is that while it's often viewed through a lens of manipulation, its most powerful application actually begins with self-mastery. Machiavelli understood this fundamental truth when he wrote that a leader must first conquer himself before attempting to conquer others. This internal revolution transforms psychological warfare from being merely about strategic mind games to becoming a journey of personal enlightenment. When we examine the psychological blueprints of history's most influential figures, we discover a pattern of mental fortification that transcends their diverse circumstances. They cultivated an unshakable inner sanctuary, a psychological fortress that external forces couldn't penetrate. This wasn't just about blocking negative influences, but about creating a mindset so resilient that it naturally commanded respect from others. The hidden truth that few acknowledge is that emotional control serves as the cornerstone of any meaningful influence. Think about moments when someone's complete composure in a chaotic situation naturally positioned them as the leader. This isn't coincidental. It's the visible manifestation of psychological dominance at work. Their inner stability creates a gravitational pull, drawing others toward their orbit of certainty. I want to emphasize something critical here. This process isn't about becoming emotionally detached or cold. Quite the opposite. The most psychologically dominant individuals have profound emotional intelligence. They simply choose when and how to express their emotions rather than being controlled by them. This selective vulnerability actually strengthens their position rather than weakening it. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this internal mastery translates into external power dynamics. When you've achieved genuine self-governance, you develop an almost uncanny ability to read the psychological terrain around you. You notice subtle power shifts in conversations, detect unspoken motivations, and identify psychological weak points that others unconsciously reveal. This heightened awareness creates a decision-making advantage in virtually every interaction. While others react based on immediate emotional impulses or social pressure, you operate from a position of psychological clarity. This doesn't mean manipulating others, though certainly some have used these principles that way, but rather understanding human nature so thoroughly that you can navigate it with intention rather than confusion. The transformation begins with recognizing that most people live in response mode, constantly reacting to external triggers and circumstances. The psychologically dominant individual, however, creates their own internal reality first, then projects it outward. This subtle shift in approach fundamentally changes how others perceive and respond to you. If you're connecting with these ideas on a personal level, write "inner fortress" in the comments. I'd love to know who among you recognizes this path of mental sovereignty as their own journey. That's why personal retreats have been fundamental to every great thinker throughout history. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, even modern visionaries like Bill Gates, they all dedicated time to complete solitude. This isolation isn't just about escaping distractions, it's about creating the space for deeper revelations that simply can't emerge in the constant noise of everyday life. When we're constantly surrounded by others, we naturally calibrate our thoughts and behaviors to fit social expectations. This unconscious adjustment prevents us from discovering our authentic core, the raw, unfiltered self that holds our greatest potential. The journey inward requires courage, precisely, because we might not initially like what we find. Think about emotional mastery as developing an internal technology. Just as you wouldn't expect to master an instrument without deliberate practice, emotional self-regulation requires consistent training. The breakthrough comes when you realize that emotional reactions aren't automatic. They're pathways you've strengthened through repetition. New neural connections form when you consciously choose different responses. What's fascinating is how this practice transforms your perception of provocations. That colleague who always pushed your buttons? Their comments gradually lose their power, not because they've changed, but because you've rewired your interpretation system. This represents true freedom, when external circumstances no longer dictate your internal state. Consider the hidden dimension of this practice. When you maintain composure while others lose theirs, you gain tremendous influence in any situation. People naturally Gravitate toward and respect those who demonstrate emotional sovereignty. It's a form of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. The most powerful aspect of this transformation is how it ripples outward. As your own emotional mastery grows, you'll notice you become a stabilizing force for others. In crisis situations, your practiced calm becomes contagious. This isn't just personal development. It's developing leadership capacity, whether or not you hold a formal leadership imposition. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this practice reshapes your decision-making abilities. Because emotional mastery isn't just about appearing composed. It fundamentally alters how you navigate life's complexities. Drop a comment saying "inner fortress" if you've experienced moments where maintaining your composure completely changed the outcome of a difficult situation. I'd love to hear about those pivotal moments of self-control. This is exactly where most people get things wrong. You see, true behavioral sovereignty isn't just about making independent choices. It's about developing an internal compass that remains steady regardless of external currents. When you stop needing others to validate your existence, something profound happens in your nervous system. The constant seeking, that subtle anxiety that underlies so many social interactions, begins to dissolve. I've witnessed this transformation countless times. People who were once perpetually concerned with how they were perceived suddenly experiencing a kind of freedom they never knew was possible. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected, quite the opposite. When you release the desperate need for others' approval, your relationships actually become more authentic and meaningful. Think about the last time you were around someone who clearly wasn't seeking your validation. There's a magnetism there, isn't there? A quality that makes you naturally drawn to their presence. That's the paradox. When you stop chasing reactions, you often receive the very recognition you once sought, but now it comes without the same emotional charge. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's a hidden dimension to behavioral sovereignty that rarely gets discussed. When you consistently act from your own center rather than reacting to others, you begin creating momentum in your life. Decisions become clearer. Opportunities seem to appear more frequently. This isn't mystical thinking, it's the natural result of channeling your energy into intentional action rather than dissipating it through reaction. The journey toward this kind of sovereignty isn't always comfortable. There will be moments when standing in your truth feels lonely, when the pull to abandon yourself for acceptance feels almost irresistible. These are the pivotal moments, the crossroads where you either strengthen your inner authority or surrender it. Remember that every time you choose validation over authenticity, you're making a trade. You're exchanging a piece of your potential power for a moment of comfort. Over time, these trades accumulate, creating a pattern of living that keeps you tethered to external approval. The remarkable thing about embracing behavioral sovereignty is how it ripples through every aspect of your life. Work becomes more purposeful. Relationships develop greater depth. Even ordinary moments take on a different quality when you're fully present rather than internally negotiating. How you should appear. If what I'm saying resonates with your experience or if you're recognizing patterns in your own life, write in the comments, "I'm reclaiming my sovereignty." I'd love to know where you are on this journey. True power operates in the shadows, making deliberate moves behind the scenes. Those who truly wield influence rarely announce their intentions. They understand that real transformation happens quietly, away from the spotlight and noise of social media validation. Think about the most impactful figures in your life or in history. They didn't achieve their status through constant self-promotion. Instead, they cultivated their strength through disciplined practice, careful observation, and an unwavering commitment to their vision. The revelation here is that power isn't measured by followers or likes. It's measured by impact and the ability to maintain composure when no one is watching. There's a profound freedom that comes with releasing yourself from the need for external validation. When you stop allowing others to define your worth, you unlock a reservoir of creative energy that had been dammed up by anxiety and people-pleasing. This journey towards self-definition isn't easy. It requires confronting uncomfortable truths about how much of your behavior has been shaped by social pressure rather than authentic desire. I want to go even deeper into this concept because it's crucial to understand. Power isn't just about influence over others. It's about sovereignty over yourself. The most formidable people I've encountered share this common trait. They've developed an internal compass that guides their decisions, regardless of trends or temporary discomfort. They've mastered the art of strategic silence, speaking only when their words carry weight and purpose. Consider how much mental bandwidth you reclaim when you stop explaining yourself to people who aren't invested in your growth. That reclaimed energy becomes the fuel for your actual goals, not the distraction of managing perceptions. The hidden truth is that most people are too consumed with their own image to pay sustained attention to yours. This realization is both humbling and liberating. It means you have far more freedom to experiment, fail, and grow than you might have believed. The most meaningful decisions in life are often made in quiet moments of clarity, not in the chaotic marketplace of opinions. By cultivating a practice of thoughtful silence and deliberate action, you signal to yourself and others that your path is chosen with intention, not reaction. This mindset shift transforms not just how others perceive you, but how you experience your own life. If any of these concepts are resonating with your experience, write "Power Moves Silently" in the comments. Now I want to explore how this principle applies specifically to situations where you might feel pressured to perform or explain yourself. But this journey toward independence and clarity isn't simply about recognizing distractions, it's about understanding the subtle transformation that happens when you consistently choose substance over noise. What I've discovered through years of refinement is that maintaining uncompromising standards isn't about perfectionism. It's about honoring what truly matters to you. Think about the environments you place yourself in daily. Each one shapes your mindset in ways you might not fully perceive. I found myself in situations where the collective energy was pulling me toward mediocrity, where casual conversations centered around fleeting entertainment rather than ideas that could reshape understanding. The revelation came when I realized these weren't neutral experiences, but active forces, either supporting or undermining my development. Behind the scenes of every significant achievement lies this uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't willing to establish boundaries around their attention. Your mental space is sacred territory, yet we hand over the keys without much consideration. Social media platforms aren't designed to serve your highest goals. They're engineered to capture and monetize your attention. The question becomes not whether you use these tools, but whether you're using them with intention or being used by them. The hidden impact of these daily decisions compounds over time. When I began treating my attention as a finite resource, something to be invested rather than spent, everything shifted. Conversations became richer, ideas had space to develop, problems that once seemed insurmountable became puzzles with solutions. This isn't merely about productivity, it's about reclaiming the clarity required to chart your own course. What's particularly striking is how this approach reveals opportunities others miss. When you're not constantly reacting to whatever is trending or popular, you develop the ability to see value where others don't. This creates a unique advantage in whatever field you choose to pursue. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how these principles translate into practical daily habits that solidify independence. The real work happens in those moments when no one is watching, when you're deciding between what's easy and what's aligned with your larger vision. The journey toward uncompromising standards isn't always comfortable. There will be moments of doubt, particularly when you see others seemingly thriving while taking shortcuts. But that temporary discomfort is the price of authentic growth, the kind that can't be faked or purchased. What appears as sacrifice in the short term reveals itself as freedom in the long view. If any of this resonates with your experience, write "claiming my attention back" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you are already on this path of intentional focus. Building a life structured around your core missions isn't just about productivity. It's about reclaiming your power in a world constantly vying for your attention. I've discovered that when you strip away the distractions and truly focus on what matters, something remarkable happens. The constant background anxiety that plagues so many of us begins to dissolve. This transformation isn't immediate. When I first began eliminating outside noise from my life, I felt a strange discomfort, almost a withdrawal. We become addicted to distractions, to the constant ping of notifications and the social validation they represent. The journey toward precision requires you to confront this dependency head-on. Let's be honest about what's really happening in our hyper-connected world. Every app, platform, and media outlet is designed with one primary goal: to capture and monetize your attention. Your focus is literally being sold to the highest bidder. When you understand this hidden truth, reclaiming your attention becomes not just a productivity hack, but an act of personal sovereignty. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what strategic elimination actually looks like in practice. It's one thing to talk about cutting out distractions. It's another to implement a systematic approach to what stays and what goes. The mistake most people make is trying to add new productivity systems on top of an already chaotic foundation. True effectiveness comes from subtraction before addition. Think of your mental energy as a non-renewable daily resource. Every decision, every context switch, every notification response, they all withdraw from this limited account. The most impactful people I've studied are ruthless energy conservationists. They build protective boundaries around their cognitive resources, understanding that mental bandwidth is their most precious asset. The revelation that changed everything for me was recognizing that precision isn't just about doing things correctly. It's about doing precisely the right things at the right times. This requires developing an almost philosophical clarity about your core missions. What are the 2 to 3 endeavors that, if mastered, would render everything else in your life easier or unnecessary? Behind the scenes of every significant achievement is this hidden discipline of elimination. We celebrate the visible outcomes, the book published, the business launched, the weight lost, without acknowledging the invisible choices that made space for that success. The saying "less is more" has become cliché precisely because it contains such a fundamental truth about human effectiveness. The journey toward a mission-centered life isn't always comfortable. You'll face resistance from others who don't understand your boundaries. You'll battle your own conditioned responses that pull you back toward distraction. But with each deliberate choice to align your actions with your missions, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was scattered across too many commitments. What I find most fascinating is how this approach ripples through every area of life. When you begin operating with precision in your work, you naturally bring that same mindful intentionality to your relationships, your health practices, and your learning. It's less about balance and more about integration around a unified core of purpose. If you're resonating with these ideas and they're giving you a new perspective on how you might approach your own life design, type "Precision is Power" in the comments. I'd love to know this is connecting with you. These powerful figures know something most people don't: that time management isn't just about productivity, but about maintaining your personal power. When you rush from meeting to meeting, constantly checking your phone and making yourself available to everyone, you're sending a subconscious signal about your value in the world. The transformation begins when you realize that your pace literally telegraphs your importance to others. Think about how a lion moves through the savannah, not hurried, not anxious, but deliberate and aware. There's a profound psychological impact when you adopt this mindset. I've seen people completely change how others respond to them simply by slowing down their walking pace and maintaining eye contact a moment longer. These subtle shifts create ripple effects in how the world treats you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what happens in the spaces between your actions. The hidden truth is that what you don't do often matters more than what you do. Consider the power of the strategic pause, that moment when everyone expects an immediate response, and you choose silence instead. This isn't about being difficult. It's about reclaiming the natural rhythm that modern life has stolen from us. Behind the scenes of every great leader's success is this mastery of timing. When you rush to answer every email and text, you're essentially saying, "My time is less valuable than yours." But what if you flipped that dynamic? What if you made decisions about your accessibility with the same care a master chess player uses to select their moves? I recently observed a CEO during negotiations who would deliberately slow his breathing when tension rose in the room. While everyone else sped up, he created a pocket of calm around himself that was almost magnetic. The revelation here isn't that you need to be important to adopt these habits. It's that adopting these habits is what makes you important in the eyes of others. Your journey toward this kind of presence doesn't require a title or position. It simply requires awareness and the courage to break from the collective hurry that defines modern existence. When you walk like a king or queen through your day, you're not being arrogant. You're acknowledging your inherent worth and expecting others to do the same. If you've ever noticed how differently people are treated based on their demeanor rather than their credentials, drop "presence matters" in the comments. I'd love to know if you've observed this phenomenon too. Being constantly available not only drains your energy, but fundamentally reshapes how others perceive your value. Think about it. How many times have you dropped everything to respond to that late-night text or taken on extra work because you're always so reliable? This pattern creates an invisible contract where your boundaries become increasingly permeable. The psychology behind this phenomenon reveals something profound about human nature. When something is always available, we instinctively assign it less value. It's the basic principle of scarcity that marketers have exploited for decades, but we rarely apply this wisdom to ourselves. Your presence, your time, your attention, these are your most precious resources, yet many of us distribute them as if they were unlimited. I want to go even deeper into this revelation. Strategic absence creates space for others to recognize your worth. When you're constantly filling every silence, solving every problem, and occupying every moment, you leave no room for appreciation to develop. This isn't about playing mind games. It's about understanding the natural rhythm of human connection and value perception. Consider the transformation that occurs when you begin practicing the art of occasional unavailability. Colleagues who once sent emails expecting immediate responses regardless of the hour suddenly begin planning ahead. Friends who were accustomed to last-minute invitations start including you in their advance planning. Your opinions carry more weight because they're not constantly offered. The journey toward reclaiming your power through strategic unavailability isn't always comfortable. There's that initial fear. Will people forget about me? Will opportunities pass me by? This discomfort is actually evidence of how deeply conditioned we've become to equate constant availability with success and belonging. The hidden truth is that by stepping back, you create the very conditions that allow others to step toward you. I've witnessed remarkable shifts in both personal relationships and professional dynamics when people embrace this principle. One client who had been overlooked for promotions despite working longer hours than anyone began enforcing strict boundaries around her time. Within months, her contributions were being recognized in ways they never had been before, not because she was doing more, but because her selective engagement highlighted the quality of her work. The journey from perpetual availability to strategic presence requires patience and practice. It means sitting with the discomfort of not immediately responding, of allowing silence to do its work, of trusting that your value isn't diminished but enhanced through thoughtful absence. Drop a comment below with the word boundaries if you've recognized this pattern in your own life and are ready to reclaim your power through strategic unavailability. Now, let's examine how this principle plays out across different areas of our lives. The real power in strategic composure goes far beyond just keeping calm. It's about mastering the battlefield of human interaction. This transformation into your strategic self requires understanding that reactions give away valuable information about your emotional landscape. When someone provokes you and gets a reaction, they've essentially gained intelligence about what matters to you, what hurts you, and how to potentially manipulate you in the future. I've witnessed this principle in action countless times throughout my journey observing high-level negotiations and interpersonal dynamics. The most successful people aren't just lucky, they're masters at revealing nothing while learning everything. It's a mindset shift that completely reframes how you process provocations. Think of it this way. Your emotional reactions are a limited resource. When you react to everything, you're essentially giving away free data points about yourself. But when you choose selective engagement, you're operating from a position of hidden strength. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming strategically emotional, expressing feelings only when it serves your greater purpose. The truly powerful don't react to provocations because they understand the profound truth behind controlled responses. Their power comes from making others wonder, creating a certain mystique around their thinking. When people can't easily read you, they project their own fears and assumptions onto you. This creates a psychological advantage that compounds over time. What's remarkable is how this approach transforms not just external perceptions, but your internal landscape as well. You begin developing what I call response intelligence, the ability to distinguish between situations that genuinely deserve your emotional investment versus those designed merely to knock you off balance. This discernment becomes an invaluable asset in navigating complex relationships, professional environments, and challenging social dynamics. The strategic mind recognizes that reactions are like cards in a hand. Once revealed, they can't be taken back. By maintaining composure, you keep all options open, allowing you to make decisions based on long-term objectives rather than momentary emotions. This positions you as someone who can't be easily manipulated or provoked into disadvantageous positions. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this strategic mindset creates ripple effects throughout every aspect of your life. The revelation here is that composure isn't just defensive, it's actually your greatest offensive weapon in a world that's constantly trying to pull reactions from you. If this approach to strategic composure resonates with you, write "Composure is power" in the comments below. Going deeper into this concept, we need to understand that narratives aren't just stories we passively consume. They're powerful frameworks that shape how we interpret our reality. When I first recognized this, it transformed my entire approach to social interactions. The person who controls the narrative effectively controls how others perceive events, relationships, and even their own identities. Consider this hidden truth. In every interaction, someone is setting the frame. If it's not you, you're likely operating within someone else's constructed reality. This isn't about manipulation, but rather about conscious awareness of how narratives function in our social ecosystem. Now, regarding emotional vulnerability, there's been a massive cultural shift toward celebrating openness, which certainly has its merits. However, the journey toward balance requires acknowledging that unchecked vulnerability can expose you to exploitation. Think about how often people, in positions of influence, use the language of empathy and connection while actually gathering intelligence about your weaknesses. I've witnessed countless situations where individuals who overshare find themselves subtly boxed into corners they never intended to occupy. The revelation here isn't that vulnerability itself is problematic, but rather that strategic vulnerability serves you better than indiscriminate openness. What's fascinating is how this connects to broader patterns in human relationship dynamics. When you learn to recognize narrative construction in action, you'll notice it everywhere, from casual conversations to corporate messaging, political discourse to intimate relationships. It's like suddenly seeing the underlying code of social interactions. The impact of mastering this awareness is profound. You'll find yourself making decisions from a place of genuine agency rather than reactive emotion. Your relationships transform as you recognize when you're being pulled into disempowering frames and can consciously choose whether to engage or redirect. This awareness doesn't diminish authentic connection. It actually enhances it by ensuring that when you do choose to be vulnerable, it's intentional rather than compulsive. The foundational principle here is that genuine intimacy requires discernment, not just disclosure. Now I want to go even deeper into the practical applications of narrative control, particularly how it manifests in everyday situations that might seem innocuous, but actually represent critical junctures in your social positioning. If you've ever encountered situations where you felt your emotions being leveraged against you, write in the comments, "I've seen behind the curtain." But here's what's truly transformative about developing your own philosophy. It doesn't just change how you think, it fundamentally alters how you experience reality. When you define your relationship with time, you're not just managing minutes, you're reshaping your entire journey through life. I've noticed something fascinating in my own experience. The moments when I feel most alive, most fulfilled, are rarely when I'm frantically trying to do everything. They happen when I'm operating from a place of philosophical clarity about what matters. This hidden truth about personal philosophy is that it creates a filter through which opportunities, obligations, and decisions must pass before claiming your attention. Think about the most impactful people you admire. Behind their visible success lies an invisible architecture, a philosophical framework, guiding their choices. They aren't necessarily working more hours, they're working through a lens of deeper meaning. They've developed what I call philosophical immunity to distractions that don't serve their core values. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what happens when we lack this philosophical foundation. Without it, we become reactive rather than responsive. We mistake urgency for importance. We confuse motion with progress. The absence of personal philosophy creates a vacuum that modern life is all too eager to fill with endless notifications, arbitrary deadlines, and other people's priorities. Developing your philosophy isn't a one-time event, it's an ongoing revelation. It requires periodic reflection, questioning assumptions you may have inherited rather than chosen. What beliefs about time have you absorbed from your culture, family, or workplace that might not actually serve your highest purpose? These inherited perspectives often operate beneath our awareness, silently directing our decisions. The beautiful paradox here is that by establishing philosophical boundaries around your time, you actually experience greater freedom. By saying no to what doesn't align with your values, You create expansive space for what truly matters. This isn't about rigid rules, but about conscious alignment between your deepest beliefs and your daily actions. Remember that your relationship with time is ultimately a reflection of your relationship with yourself. When you honor time as your most precious, non-renewable resource, you're honoring your own existence. The way you spend your hours reveals what you truly value, regardless of what you might say you value. If any of this is resonating with you, write philosophical clarity in the comments below. I'd love to know who else is on this journey toward a more intentional relationship with time. Ever notice how freedom sometimes arrives in the form of letting go? That's the hidden truth. I've discovered about setting boundaries with people who don't value me. It's not just about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to myself and my journey forward. When I first started implementing boundaries, I felt guilty, like I was somehow being selfish or harsh. But what transformed my perspective was realizing that my energy isn't infinite. It's one of the most valuable currencies I possess. Would you continue investing money in a company that consistently shows negative returns? Probably not. Yet many of us do exactly this with our emotional energy, repeatedly investing in connections that leave us depleted. The revelation came when I understood that calculated detachment isn't coldness, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that not everyone deserves the same level of access to your inner world. Some people have earned the right to your vulnerability, while others have demonstrated they can't be trusted with it. I remember a friendship where I constantly made myself available, rearranging my schedule whenever they needed support. But when I faced my own struggles, they were mysteriously absent. The awakening wasn't immediate, it rarely is. But gradually, I recognized the imbalance and began redirecting my energy toward relationships with genuine reciprocity. This isn't about dramatic confrontations or burning bridges. Most often, it's a quiet, internal decision to adjust your expectations and reallocate your attention. Sometimes, the most powerful boundary is simply becoming unavailable to dysfunction while remaining open to growth. What fascinates me about this mindset shift is how it ripples through every aspect of life. When you stop exhausting yourself on connections that drain you, you discover reserves of creativity and purpose you didn't know existed. Projects advance, personal goals materialize, and paradoxically, the relationships worth nurturing actually deepen. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how setting boundaries actually creates space for authentic connection in the areas of life that truly matter. Because there's something profoundly liberating about redirecting your mental power toward possibilities rather than problems. If what I've shared so far resonates with your own experience of preserving your energy, write boundaries, freedom in the comments below. These three principles, calculated silence, energy control, and strategic independence, form the bedrock of mental dominance that separates those who merely exist from those who truly command their reality. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's a fascinating psychological transformation that occurs when you implement these principles consistently. When you master calculated silence, you begin to observe patterns in others that remained invisible before. You'll notice how people reveal their intentions, insecurities, and desires simply because nature abhors a vacuum, and you've created one with your silence. This isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity. In a world where everyone is constantly broadcasting, your quiet observation becomes a superpower. Warren Buffett once noted that the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. This boundary setting is the practical application of calculated silence in your decision-making. The journey toward energy control reveals another hidden truth. Most people are living in a constant state of mental and emotional reactivity. They're like leaves in the wind, blown about by whatever stimulus appears in front of them. When you carefully allocate your energy only to endeavors that compound in value, you create a force multiplier effect in your life. This is why some people seem to accomplish in a single year what takes others a decade. What's particularly fascinating is how these principles interlock. Your strategic independence creates the space for calculated silence, which preserves your energy, which fuels your independence. It's a virtuous cycle that builds momentum over time. Behind the scenes of every truly impressive achievement, whether in business, art, relationships, or personal development, you'll find these principles at work. Leonardo da Vinci spent years in relative solitude developing his ideas. Steve Jobs was notorious for his selective communication and focus. Maya Angelou deliberately removed herself from the noise of society to produce her most important work. The revelation here isn't that these principles are new. They've been employed by extraordinary individuals throughout history. The insight is that they're available to anyone willing to go against the current of constant connection, perpetual sharing, and endless distraction that defines our modern existence. What's really at stake is nothing less than your personal sovereignty. Without these principles, you remain at the mercy of others' agendas, emotions, and expectations. With them, you begin authoring your own story with intention and purpose. I've seen firsthand how implementing even one of these principles can create ripple effects across someone's entire life. One client began practicing calculated silence in meetings and found not only that her words carried more weight, but that her anxiety around social situations dramatically decreased. If any of this resonates with you, write in the comments. Silence is my strength. I'd love to know who among you is ready to embrace these principles and begin the journey toward true mental dominance. If you've stayed with me through this exploration of mental dominance, you're clearly someone who values genuine personal power over quick fixes and surface-level tactics. I hope these principles offer you a framework to reclaim your mental sovereignty in a world that's constantly competing for your attention and energy. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it becomes more powerful the longer you practice it. If you found value in these insights, consider subscribing to the channel where we continue to explore the deeper psychology behind true influence and personal mastery. These aren't just concepts to understand. They're practices that transform when implemented. Let me know you made it to the end by commenting, "Silence is my strength," below. Your comment helps me understand which topics truly resonate with this community. And if this perspective shifted something for you, a simple like helps others discover this conversation too. There's a video right here that explores how to maintain these principles even in high-pressure situations where others are trying to break your frame. Click and continue with me there to build on what we've started here today.